The Kensington mansion stood tall on the hill, its windows gleaming in the morning sun, its gardens perfectly trimmed by professional landscapers. For anyone passing by, it was a symbol of wealth, power, and refinement. Inside, however, not everything glittered as brightly as the marble floors. The family that lived there, the Kensingtons, were wealthy indeed, but their daughter, Melissa, had a reputation. At 17, she was spoiled to the core, often referred to as the princess of the house. Servants whispered about her temper tantrums, her arrogance, and the way she demanded respect without offering any in return. On that bright Monday morning, a new maid arrived at the gates. She wasn't what one might expect in such a luxurious household. Her dress was plain and simple, her shoes slightly worn, and her hair tied neatly in a bun without any fancy accessories. She carried only a small leather bag, surprisingly modest for someone seeking work in such a grand estate. The guards exchanged curious looks but allowed her in. She introduced herself softly. "My name is Isabella," she said in a low, polite tone. There was nothing unusual in her voice, yet something about her calm confidence made her stand out. Unlike other maids who often appeared nervous and timid on their first day, Isabella walked with quiet assurance. She didn't gawk at the tall golden gates, the crystal chandeliers, or the polished marble staircase inside. She simply nodded when the housekeeper, Mrs. Doyle, explained her duties. "You will be responsible for cleaning the guest wing, assisting in the kitchen when called, and taking care of laundry. Understand?" Mrs. Doyle spoke sternly, her years of managing the staff making her voice sharp. "Yes, ma'am," Isabella replied, bowing slightly. Her obedience seemed ordinary, but what no one realized was that this maid was no ordinary woman. She was Isabella Hart, an immensely wealthy businesswoman, owner of several luxury companies, and a billionaire in her own right. But today, she wore no designer suits or diamond jewelry. Today, she was disguised as a servant, hiding her identity behind simplicity. Why would a billionaire do such a thing? Isabella had her reasons. She had grown tired of false smiles and shallow flattery from people who only cared about her fortune. She wanted to know how people treated others when money wasn't involved. Most importantly, she had been hearing whispers of Melissa Kensington, the spoiled brat who humiliated every maid that dared to work in her house. Isabella wanted to see for herself if this was true, and if it was, she intended to teach the young girl a lesson. When Melissa first laid eyes on Isabella, her reaction was immediate. She wrinkled her nose as though she smelled something unpleasant. "Is this the new maid?" Melissa asked loudly, her voice carrying across the marble hall. She was dressed in a designer skirt and blouse, her long hair flowing over her shoulders. Her diamond earrings sparkled under the chandelier. "She looks cheap." Mrs. Doyle stiffened, lowering her eyes. She had seen Melissa insult countless staff members before, but she dared not scold her. The girl's parents always excused her behavior. Isabella, however, simply smiled faintly. "Yes, miss. I'll be serving in the guest wing," Isabella said, her tone respectful. Melissa crossed her arms, smirking. "Guest wing? Ha! I suppose we'll see how long you last. Most maids quit after a week. Some can't even last a day." The challenge in her voice was sharp, and the servants standing nearby exchanged knowing glances. They had all witnessed Melissa's cruelty. She enjoyed breaking people down, reminding them of their place, but Isabella didn't flinch. "I'll do my best, miss," she replied softly. As the day went on, Isabella settled into her work. She scrubbed the wooden floors, polished the silver, and carefully arranged the guest rooms. Unlike other maids who worked with nervous haste, she moved with calm precision. There was a grace in her movements that didn't belong to an ordinary servant. Some of the staff began to whisper. "Strange, isn't it?" one cook murmured. "The way she works. It's like she doesn't care about impressing anyone, but everything comes out perfect. She doesn't even look tired," another maid added, watching Isabella lift heavy sheets with surprising strength. But Melissa noticed something else: Isabella's calmness. To Melissa, this was irritating. She expected maids to look frightened, to bow quickly, to scramble at her commands. Yet Isabella carried herself with quiet dignity, and Melissa hated it. That evening, as Isabella carried laundry down the hallway, Melissa deliberately blocked her path. "Hey, Maid," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "What kind of shoes are those? They look like they came from a thrift store. Did you buy them for $1? A few of Melissa's friends, who had come over after school, giggled at her remark. They loved watching Melissa humiliate others. Isabella looked down at her shoes, simple brown flats. She lifted her head and gave a small, calm smile. "They're comfortable, miss. That's what matters." Melissa rolled her eyes. "Comfortable? That's something poor people say when they can't afford style." Her friends laughed again, and Melissa felt triumphant. She believed she had scored another victory in her endless game of superiority. Yet Isabella's calmness unsettled her. She couldn't understand why the maid didn't react, didn't cry, didn't snap back. What Melissa didn't know was that Isabella had seen arrogance many times before. At parties, in boardrooms, among rivals in business. Wealth often made people proud, and she had long ago learned the power of patience. As night fell, Isabella looked out from the window of the small servant quarters assigned to her. The lights of the city glittered in the distance. She thought about the day, about Melissa's words, about the way the girl's pride blinded her. Isabella sighed softly. "This house," she whispered to herself, "will be my stage, and Melissa Kensington my student." She closed her eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring more challenges. But she was ready, for Isabella was not here merely to serve. She was here to reveal a truth hidden beneath marble floors and crystal chandeliers. That respect, not riches, defined true greatness. Melissa Kensington woke up late the next morning as usual. Sunlight filtered through her silk curtains, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the kitchen below. She stretched lazily, glanced at her phone, and immediately frowned. "Only 50 likes in an hour? Pathetic," she muttered, scrolling through her social media posts. For Melissa, her world revolved around appearances. Her clothes, her followers, her status. Servants in the house existed only to cater to her whims. And now, there was a new face in the mansion. Isabella, the maid she had already decided she disliked. By the time Melissa strolled into the breakfast room, Isabella was already busy laying out the table. A silver tray held croissants, fresh juice, and butter. Isabella's movements were graceful, her posture straight, her eyes calm. This, for some reason, annoyed Melissa deeply. "You're doing it wrong," Melissa snapped. Though everything on the table was perfectly arranged, Isabella turned politely. "I'm sorry, miss. Would you like me to change something?" Melissa smirked. "Yes, start over. I don't like the way you place the napkins. And the orange juice, it looks too watery. Bring another." The staff nearby stiffened. They knew Melissa was simply making up faults to belittle Isabella. Yet the new maid simply bowed her head slightly. "As you wish, miss." She removed everything and began again, this time folding the napkins with even more precision, pouring a fresh glass of juice. Her silence frustrated Melissa, who thrived on watching maids crumble under her scorn. "You know," Melissa said loudly, making sure the butler and 2 other servants could hear, "you don't really belong here. You look more like someone who should be scrubbing public bathrooms than working in a mansion." The servants lowered their heads, ashamed for Isabella. But Isabella, keeping her calm composure, replied softly, "A person belongs wherever they choose to work with honesty, miss." Melissa's eyes narrowed. She wasn't expecting that. To her, this answer felt like defiance, even though Isabella's tone carried no rudeness. She wanted the maid to be humiliated, but instead she seemed untouched. That irritated Melissa even more. Throughout the day, Melissa found new ways to torment her. She tossed her clothes on the floor after trying them on and ordered Isabella to pick them up. "Fold them neatly, and be careful with that one. It's limited edition, probably worth more than your entire life." Isabella picked up the clothes, her expression neutral. She smoothed the fabric gently before folding. "It's a beautiful dress, miss," she said kindly. Melissa scoffed. "Of course it is. Everything I wear is beautiful. Unlike. She let the words hang in the air, her eyes scanning Isabella's plain attire. Later, in the living room, Melissa purposely spilled her drink on the carpet. Oh no! Look what happened. Maid, clean this up immediately. And be quick. My friends are coming soon. Isabella knelt gracefully, blotting the stain without a word. Melissa watched her silently for a moment, then muttered under her breath. You don't even look embarrassed. What's wrong with you? When Isabella looked up, her eyes were calm, steady. Embarrassment comes when one has done something wrong, miss. I have not. Melissa felt her cheeks flush. Not with shame, but with irritation. She wanted Isabella to feel small, powerless. Instead, it was she who felt oddly unsettled. By afternoon, Melissa's two closest friends, Amanda and Chloe, arrived. Together they lounged in the sunroom, gossiping about classmates and showing off their designer handbags. When Isabella entered quietly to serve lemonade, Melissa seized the chance to show off her dominance. Careful with that tray, Melissa said loudly, smirking at her friends. She's new. Probably doesn't know how to hold a glass without dropping it. Her friends giggled. Really? She looks so serious, Chloe remarked. Melissa rolled her eyes. Serious, yes, but I bet she's clumsy. Watch. She deliberately nudged the tray as Isabella set it down, causing a glass to tip slightly. The lemonade spilled across the table, splashing onto Isabella's sleeve. Melissa burst out laughing. See? I told you. Completely useless. Amanda and Chloe laughed too, though their smiles faded when they noticed Isabella's composed reaction. The maid didn't defend herself, nor did she cry. She simply cleaned the spill carefully, then excused herself quietly. Wow! She didn't even argue, Chloe whispered once Isabella left. Most maids would have blamed you for pushing the tray. Melissa tossed her hair back. That's because she knows her place. But deep down, Melissa felt uneasy. There was something strange about Isabella. Her calmness wasn't fear, it was strength. And Melissa hated it. That evening, when Isabella passed through the hallway carrying folded towels, Melissa stepped in front of her again. Tell me, Maid, Melissa said in a mocking tone, do you ever get tired of serving people like me? People who are richer, smarter, and prettier than you. Isabella stopped, her eyes meeting Melissa's. For the first time, there was a faint glimmer in her gaze. Not anger, but something unreadable. Serving is not tiring when it is done with sincerity, miss, Isabella said gently. But cruelty, I imagine, must be very tiring. The words struck Melissa like a hidden arrow. Her face reddened instantly. How dare you, she began. But before she could finish, Isabella bowed her head respectfully and walked past, leaving Melissa speechless. Melissa stood frozen in the hallway, her fists clenched. She wasn't used to this. Normally, maids either burst into tears or begged not to be fired. But Isabella, she was different. She didn't fight back, but she didn't break either. That night, Melissa sat in her room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time, a small whisper of doubt crept into her mind. Why did she feel as though the maid was testing her, rather than the other way around? Still, her pride silenced the thought. She's just a maid, Melissa muttered, brushing her hair angrily. And I'll make sure she never forgets it. Little did she know, every cruel word, every childish act of humiliation, was being silently observed and remembered. For the maid she despised was no ordinary servant, but a billionaire in disguise. One who was patiently waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. Saturday arrived with golden sunlight pouring through the wide glass windows of the Kensington mansion. The house was buzzing with preparation. Melissa had decided to host a small gathering for her school friends. A chance to flaunt her wealth, show off her new designer wardrobe, and remind everyone of her social superiority. The maids hurried about, polishing the crystal glasses, arranging the dining hall, and setting out trays of hors d'oeuvres. Isabella worked silently among them, arranging napkins and placing dishes with her usual calm grace. She didn't complain, didn't rush, and didn't seem the least bit nervous despite the chaos. Melissa, however, strutted around like a queen inspecting her kingdom. Dressed in a shimmering silver dress, her hair styled to perfection, she barked orders with sharp impatience. Not like that, stupid. The flowers go in the tall vase, not the short one. Those cushions are crooked. Do you expect my friends to sit on something ugly? You there, yes, you, Isabella. Make sure the drinks are cold. If anyone complains, you'll be the one to blame. Isabella bowed slightly. Of course, miss. By the afternoon, the guests began to arrive. Amanda, Chloe, and several others from Melissa's private academy. Laughter filled the halls as the teenagers gossiped about classmates, compared handbags, and scrolled through each other's posts on social media. When Isabella entered with a tray of sparkling lemonade, Melissa seized the opportunity to humiliate her in front of everyone. Careful, Melissa said loudly, making sure the room went quiet. This one is new. She might trip and spill it all over you. Her friends giggled, watching curiously. Isabella moved forward steadily, serving each glass with flawless composure. Her hands didn't shake. Her steps didn't falter. Melissa frowned. She wanted Isabella to stumble, to prove her inferiority. Instead, the maid's movements were almost elegant, as though she had done this countless times before. Though in truth, Isabella had served drinks at banquets far grander than Melissa could imagine, as a guest of honor, not as a servant. Chloe leaned toward Amanda, whispering, "She doesn't seem clumsy at all." Melissa heard it. Anger flared in her chest. She needed to do something more dramatic. As Isabella returned with another tray, this time carrying small cakes and pastries, Melissa stuck her foot out ever so slightly. The tray tilted, and one of the cakes slid off, landing on Isabella's sleeve. Gasps filled the room. Melissa burst into laughter, clapping her hands together. "See? I told you she's useless. Can't even carry a tray without dropping food. Look at her. Ruined the dress she probably borrowed from a thrift store." The guests chuckled nervously, but not all of them laughed as freely as Melissa. Amanda bit her lip, glancing at Isabella, who calmly placed the tray down, dabbed her sleeve with a cloth, and bent to clean the small mess without a word. "Why doesn't she say anything?" Chloe whispered. "If it were me, I'd be crying." Melissa rolled her eyes dramatically. "That's because she's too dumb to even know she's being laughed at." But deep down, she was unsettled. Why didn't Isabella react? Most maids would have begged for forgiveness, maybe even fled the room in shame. Yet Isabella's silence felt stronger than any protest. As the evening went on, Melissa continued her cruel game. She handed Isabella empty plates just to order her to bring new ones. She snapped her fingers when she wanted a refill. At one point, she even said loudly, "Don't stand so close to us. You're making the air smell cheap." Her friends laughed again, but their laughter had lost some of its sparkle. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. Chloe gave a weak chuckle, then sipped her drink in silence. The turning point came when Melissa deliberately spilled a glass of juice on the floor. The bright liquid spread across the carpet. "Oh no," Melissa said with a smirk. "Look at this disaster. Maid, clean it up, and make sure you don't leave a stain. This carpet costs more than your entire family's income." The room went quiet. Everyone watched Isabella. Slowly, she bent down, blotting the stain carefully with a towel. Her face remained serene, her movements steady. She didn't argue. She didn't protest. She simply did the work with quiet dignity. Amanda leaned toward Chloe again. "Isn't this a little too much? She didn't even do anything wrong." Melissa overheard and shot them a glare. "What? You feel sorry for her? Please, she's just a maid. That's her job." But her words rang hollow. For the first time, her friends weren't nodding eagerly. Some avoided her gaze. Others looked at Isabella with something resembling admiration. When Isabella finished cleaning, she stood slowly, straightened her back, and glanced around the room. For a moment, her calm eyes met Melissa's. There was no anger in them, only patience, as though she were silently enduring a childish storm. Melissa felt her stomach twist. Why did it feel like she was the one being tested, not the other way around? The rest of the party went on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Though Melissa continued to brag and laugh, her friends were quieter. Several times, Amanda glanced at Isabella with a look of guilt. Chloe even said softly, "She's really graceful, isn't she? Even when you embarrass her." Melissa snapped, "Graceful? Don't be ridiculous. She's just pretending. She knows her place." But inside, Melissa felt an unfamiliar unease. For the first time, she wondered if her cruelty had backfired. Instead of making her look powerful, it made her look petty. Instead of breaking the maid, she had revealed something about herself, something ugly. That night, after the guests left, Melissa stormed to her room, pacing back and forth. "Why do I care what they think?" she muttered. "She's just a servant, just a nobody." But the memory of Isabella's calm gaze haunted her. It was as though the maid had seen straight through her arrogance, straight into her insecurities. Melissa clenched her fists. "Tomorrow," she whispered to herself, "I'll show her. I'll humiliate her worse than ever." What she didn't know was that her every act of cruelty was bringing her closer to the moment when her world would shatter, the moment when the maid she mocked would reveal the truth of who she really was. The Kensington family prided themselves on their wealth and influence, and tonight was one of those evenings that gave them a chance to display it. An exclusive business gala was being held at the city's most prestigious hotel ballroom. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities, and heirs to vast fortunes would all be in attendance. Mr. and Mrs. Kensington were thrilled to have been invited, eager to expand their connections. Melissa, of course, was more excited about showing off her designer gown than anything else. She wore a sparkling emerald dress, adorned with matching jewelry her father had purchased just for the occasion. "Everyone will stare at me," Melissa declared as she twirled before the mirror. "They'll know I belong among the rich and powerful." The chauffeur drove them in a sleek black limousine, and as they entered the grand ballroom, Melissa gasped at the glittering chandeliers, the golden walls, and the sea of elegant guests. Waiters carried trays of champagne while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Melissa smirked as she spotted her classmates in the crowd. She lifted her chin, parading around as if the night existed just to celebrate her. But all of that pride would soon be shaken to its very core. The Kensingtons took their seats at a round table near the front, reserved for influential guests. Melissa leaned over to her mother. "Who's the keynote speaker tonight? Do we know them?" Mrs. Kensington scanned the glossy program on the table. "Let's see. Isabella Hart." Melissa froze. The name rang in her ears. For a moment she thought she had misheard. "Isabella Hart. That's the maid's name." Her father chuckled. "Don't be silly, darling. This Isabella Hart is one of the most powerful women in the country. Billionaire entrepreneur, owner of luxury brands, real estate, tech investments, practically a legend." Melissa's heart began to pound. No, couldn't be. It had to be a coincidence. The lights dimmed, and the announcer's voice filled the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage tonight's keynote speaker, the visionary businesswoman, philanthropist, and self-made billionaire, Ms. Isabella Hart." A hush fell over the room as a figure stepped onto the stage. The spotlight revealed her, elegant in a floor-length gown of midnight blue, diamonds glinting at her ears, her hair styled with effortless sophistication. Melissa's breath caught in her throat. It was her. It was the maid. Gasps erupted at the Kensington table. Mrs. Kensington covered her mouth in shock, and Mr. Kensington muttered, "Good heavens!" Melissa's world seemed to crumble in an instant. The woman she had mocked, insulted, and humiliated in her own home was now standing on the stage, not as a servant, but as someone more powerful, more respected, more wealthy than her entire family combined. Isabella approached the podium with the same calm composure she had always shown, but tonight it radiated authority. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady yet warm. "It is an honor to stand before so many esteemed leaders. Tonight, I wish to share not only my journey in business, but also a lesson, one that is far more valuable than money." Melissa sat frozen in her seat, her palms sweating. Every word felt like a knife twisting in her pride. Isabella continued, "In my career, I have built companies, created jobs, and grown wealth. But I have also seen the dangers of arrogance and the blindness that comes with privilege. Too often, people believe that status defines worth, that wealth determines respect. But true worth, true greatness, is measured only by how we treat others." Her gaze swept across the audience, and for a brief moment, her eyes locked directly on Melissa. The spoiled girl felt her stomach sink as though the floor had dropped beneath her. "Recently," Isabella said, her tone soft but pointed, "I had the opportunity to see this truth for myself. I chose to step away from luxury, to hide my identity, and to live among those who serve quietly, often ignored and belittled. What I witnessed was both painful and enlightening. Some treated me with kindness, despite believing me to be poor. Others revealed the worst parts of themselves, thinking I was beneath them." The audience murmured, intrigued. Melissa wanted to shrink into her chair, her cheeks burning. She knew exactly whom Isabella was referring to. "But in the end," Isabella concluded, "I was reminded of something my late father once told me. Money can buy mansions but not respect, can purchase jewelry but not dignity, can give power but never true greatness. Tonight, I urge you all to remember this. Your legacy will not be measured by your wealth, but by your kindness." The ballroom erupted into thunderous applause. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, admiring the billionaire who spoke not of money, but of humility and humanity. Melissa, however, sat trembling. Her friends from school were in the crowd, many of them staring at her with wide eyes, whispering. They all knew. They all remembered how she had treated the maid. The humiliation was unbearable. After the speech, Isabella mingled among the guests, greeted by business leaders who shook her hand eagerly, hoping to win her favor. The Kensingtons sat awkwardly, unsure whether to approach her or flee, but Isabella made the choice for them. She walked gracefully toward their table. The crowd parted around her, watching curiously. Melissa's breath hitched. She wanted to disappear. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Kensington," Isabella said politely. "It was generous of you to host me in your home recently," Mr. Kensington stammered. "We had no idea. Miss Hart, forgive us." Isabella's calm gaze shifted to Melissa, who sat rigid, her eyes wide with shame. "And you, Miss Kensington," Isabella said softly. "We have spent some time together. I hope you learned something valuable." Melissa's voice cracked. I didn't know who you were." Isabella smiled faintly. "That is exactly the point. You should not need to know someone's title, wealth, or status to treat them with respect. Every person, regardless of their appearance or station, deserves dignity." Melissa's throat tightened. Tears stung her eyes, but she couldn't find the words. Isabella placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, not as a gesture of triumph, but of mercy. "Do better, Melissa. That is all I ask." And with that, Isabella turned, leaving Melissa to the silence of her own humiliation. Around her, the whispers of her friends and classmates grew louder. For the first time in her life, Melissa felt powerless. It was not her wealth, her beauty, or her designer dress that defined her tonight. It was her cruelty, and everyone had seen it. Later that night, as the limousine carried them home, Melissa sat quietly, staring out the window. Her parents spoke in hushed tones, too ashamed to address what had happened. In her mind, Melissa replayed every cruel word she had spoken to Isabella, every laugh, every insult. Shame burned hotter than fire. She finally understood what Isabella's calm gaze had always meant. It wasn't weakness. It was strength, the strength of someone who didn't need to prove her worth, because it had never depended on wealth. And for the first time, Melissa wondered, could she ever learn to be like that? The limousine ride home from the gala was suffocating. For once, Melissa didn't flood the silence with chatter about her clothes or social media. Instead, she sat pressed against the window, her emerald dress glittering faintly under the streetlights, her reflection staring back at her with tear-stained eyes. Her parents tried to speak in hushed tones, but the embarrassment in their voices was undeniable. "I can't believe it," Mrs. Kensington whispered. "All this time, she was that Isabella Hart." Mr. Kensington sighed heavily. "We have made fools of ourselves. Our own daughter mocking a woman who could buy this house 100 times over. What will society say?" Melissa shrank into her seat. Normally, her parents' words rolled off her, but tonight they pierced deep. This wasn't just about social embarrassment. This was about her. She had been cruel, petty, and arrogant, not just in front of her friends, but to a woman who embodied everything she was not: strength, dignity, grace. For the first time in her life, Melissa wished she could undo her actions. But the memory of Isabella's calm voice at the gala echoed in her mind. You should not need to know someone's title, wealth, or status to treat them with respect. Those words haunted her. The following morning, Melissa didn't wake up with her usual excitement to post photos online or plan her next shopping spree. She stayed in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. Every detail of the last week replayed in her head. The spilled juice, the mocking laughter, the cruel remarks about thrift store shoes, and Isabella's eyes. Always calm, always steady. Melissa felt something she hadn't felt in years: shame. Real, heavy shame. At breakfast, she surprised everyone by eating quietly. No snapping at the servants, no complaints about the orange juice being too watery. She even whispered a soft, awkward thank you when her plate was served. The staff exchanged curious glances, wondering if the spoiled brat had fallen ill. Days passed, and Melissa's behavior began to change in small but noticeable ways. She no longer threw her clothes on the floor for the maids to pick up. Instead, she folded them herself, albeit clumsily. When she accidentally spilled a drink, she bent down to clean it. The staff whispered about it endlessly. None of them could believe it. One afternoon, Melissa found herself walking past the guest wing where Isabella had once stayed. The room was empty now, but Melissa stood at the doorway, imagining the billionaire disguised in plain clothes, patiently enduring her cruelty. Tears welled in her eyes. "Why was I so blind?" she whispered to herself. At school, the humiliation from the gala lingered. Her classmates teased her behind her back. "Did you hear? Melissa bullied a billionaire and didn't even know it." The whispers stung, but for once, Melissa didn't lash out. Instead, she kept her head low, too ashamed to argue. But the sting of humiliation planted something deeper inside her. A seed of humility. A week later, Melissa made a decision that shocked everyone, including herself. She went to Mrs. Doyle, the housekeeper, and said, "Teach me how to help in the kitchen." Mrs. Doyle nearly dropped the pan she was holding. "Pardon, miss? You want to help?" Melissa nodded, cheeks flushing. I need to learn. Please." The first day was a disaster. She burned her fingers trying to stir soup, spilled flour across the counter, and nearly broke a plate. The maids giggled behind their hands, unable to believe what they were seeing. Melissa, the spoiled princess, fumbling like a beginner. But instead of yelling or storming off, Melissa laughed at herself. For the first time in years, her laughter wasn't mocking. It was genuine. By the end of the week, she managed to bake a tray of cookies, slightly overcooked but edible. She carried them proudly to the servants' dining area. "They're not perfect," she said nervously, "but I made them for you." The staff stared at her in stunned silence before slowly applauding. Some even wiped tears from their eyes. For them, this was nothing short of a miracle. But Melissa's greatest test came when Isabella herself returned. It was a sunny afternoon when the billionaire arrived at the Kensington mansion, this time in her sleek black car, dressed in her usual elegance. Melissa froze at the sight of her, her heart thundering in her chest. She wanted to run, to hide, but instead she forced herself to walk forward. "Miss Hart," she said softly, her voice trembling, I want to apologize." Isabella regarded her with the same calm gaze as always. "Apologize for what, Melissa?" Melissa swallowed hard. "For everything. for mocking you, for treating you like less than human. I thought I was better because of money, because of clothes and status. But I was wrong. I was cruel. And I'm ashamed. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she spoke, her pride stripped away. The servants, gathered nearby, watched in stunned silence. For a long moment, Isabella said nothing. Then she stepped closer, lifting Melissa's chin gently so their eyes met. "Do you know why I chose your house, Melissa?" Isabella asked. Melissa shook her head. "Because I heard about you," Isabella said softly. "I heard of the spoiled girl who humiliated every maid. And I wanted to see for myself if there was hope for you. I wanted to test your heart." Melissa's breath caught. "And what did you see?" Isabella smiled faintly. "I saw arrogance. But now, I see change." Melissa broke into sobs, clinging to Isabella's hand. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me." Isabella embraced her gently. "Remember, Melissa, kindness is the greatest wealth you can ever possess. Spend it freely." From that day forward, Melissa's transformation became undeniable. She no longer treated the staff as invisible. She thanked them, helped them, and even defended them when guests tried to belittle them. She began volunteering at local charities, donating her allowance to causes that help children in need. Her friends at school were baffled. Some mocked her new humility, calling it an act. But Melissa didn't care. For the first time, she wasn't living to impress anyone. She was living to be better. And though whispers of her humiliation at the gala never completely faded, they slowly transformed into something else: admiration. People began to say, "Melissa Kensington changed. She's different now. She learned." Late one evening, Melissa sat at her window, gazing at the city lights in the distance, the same way Isabella once had from the servants' quarters. She whispered to herself, "Respect, not riches. That's the lesson." And for the first time in her life, Melissa felt truly rich.